Did everyone enjoy the keynote from Jesus talk, right? Yeah. Alright, cool. Alright, so I am Ben Edmunds. Ben Edmunds on Twitter, or benedmunds.com is my blog if you want to check it out. I hardly ever update the blog post, so I don't really recommend it, but I do love me some Twitter. So if you want to catch up, if you want to talk later, definitely hit me up on there. I'm pretty active. I'd love to chat with you. I did a little bit of open source work, mostly with the Coding Network framework, which is a little bit of an older framework for PHP. I'm on their board, and I'm also on their security council, and I have a few libraries, things like that. Most people know me from IANOF, which is an auth library for Coding Network. I have a book I've written called Build Secure PHP Applications, which it would be great to check that out. I do the PHP Town Hall podcast with my buddy Phil Sturgeon. We usually just kind of grab some guests every episode and then we rant for a little while for things that make us engage. And I'm the CTO at Mindfulware. We do insurance and medical software, mostly with PHP stack, also with some notes for it. So if you want to talk about either one of those, that would be a good time. Today we're going to walk through a few things. So we're going to kind of walk through some modern PHP things that have been changed in PHP in the past few years. Some that's a little older, and some that's a little newer, but it's things that I don't see people using all the time, pretty often throughout the project, so it's things I want to call attention to. Things that maybe you haven't seen, haven't heard of yet, or you just haven't tried, and we'll give you a little push to try it out. Then we'll go through some of the new standards in PHP, mostly done with the PHP today is putting out, and how that's being accepted across projects. And then we'll go through community. How do you get out in the community? How do you find the community near you? Things like that. So for the modern PHP, we're going to go through exceptions, closures, namespaces, static short arrays, null coalescing operator, and PDO. So you can see it's kind of a mix of things that have been in PHP for a few years and some things that are new. Null coalescing is probably the newest. That's for PHP 7. We'll go through that, and this is really just kind of random things that I think are interesting that don't get too much airplay. We'll go through some of the newer tools in PHP. A lot of people don't know PHP has some pretty cool tools built in now, like the built-in web server. It's great for development work. Composer for dependency management, and then some really awesome unit testing tools, both built in and then on top, which we'll walk through pretty briefly, but I'm going to call attention to. Then we'll go through the standards that Fig's putting out, along with their currently active PSRs, and we'll go through the more accepted, more popular PSRs. Then the community. We'll talk about where to find your community on Twitter, where to get involved with user groups, IRC, things like that. All right, so let's get into this. Exceptions. What are exceptions? Exceptions are a way to handle when something goes wrong in your code. Years ago, you might have just tried something and it failed, returned false, or expected it to just error out, to crash, whatever. What you want to do is you want to catch that exception. You want to check to see, is this thing I'm doing working properly? Did it fail? Throw an exception, something bad happened. And so, you want to handle that. You can also be smart about your exceptions. You can check to see if your exception is a certain type, and then handle each exception differently. It's not just a catch-all, right? So you can say, this exception A happens, we're going to follow this path, we're going to do this thing. If exception B happens, we'll do this other thing. Or you can say, if any exception happens, let's catch them all, because we don't want the application to crash, and we're going to follow this plan B over here. That's what we do. We just have a generic error. This is what it looks like in your code. You're going to try catch block. So here you can see try. And then in your try is where you would try to do whatever you're going to do. So maybe it's a login to your application or posting something to your database, a safe call, whatever. Anything you need to make sure, did this complete successfully? If it doesn't, we're going to catch. So here this is just a generic exception, and it'll catch anything that's in the exception type. And then here we're just going to dive into the get message. So this is an exception object. It has a generic method called get message, which is just give me the message for why you failed. Here we're just going to throw it on the screen. No big deal. But you can see the example here, this try catch. So we could catch a certain exception. So let's say we have a bad password exception or a bad email exception for our login method. So we're going to try a login, and then if it's a bad email, invalid email, we'll have a certain exception for that, catch it. And we have another exception for incorrect password, we can catch that one. We can follow different paths based on the exception type as returned. We don't have to create our own return object structure that's like, return this, if it's a bad email, it's a bad password. We don't have to create our own objects for our app, we can just handle exceptions throughout. Last thing to note right there is just our exception variable. There, you can enter variable whatever you want, but you want to make sure you grab that exception type. I'll walk through closures a little bit. Closures are anonymous functions that do something. They have a state they follow through on. So here's an example from Laravel. It's a route get call. You can see in this get call, we are passing a function through. So this isn't a named function, it's an anonymous function, but it's doing something with the data. All right, so parameter 1 to this get is just the /, that's our route. Parameter 2 is a complete function. In this function, we're just going to return the view make. No big deal what's going on there. The big thing here is just that it's not named. So we're not naming our create the index view function and passing through that function. We're just throwing it straight in there. This is really nice for kind of quick one-hitters, things that you want to group your logic in a logical container together with them, but you don't necessarily need to use it later. So there's no need to create this view somewhere else. We're just creating it here. But we do want our logic for prepping that view, for getting the variables ready for passing variables to that view. All this one logic in place. So we can pass it straight through to our right. Probably good. Namespaces. If you used say Java or any kind of larger enterprising language, you're probably very familiar with namespaces. They're fairly new to PHP, been around for well, probably 5 years now, but that's still pretty new to PHP land, right? The idea behind this is that, so we have our classes, which organize our methods. So back in the day, we only had functions, right? So we needed a way to organize that, so we had classes, which gives us a whole lot more than just organization. Let's say we have our methods under our classes. Now, how do we organize our classes? What if we use 2 libraries that have classes of the same name? So like, a user class might be pretty normal across different libraries. How do we make sure those don't conflict? How do we tell our application that we want to use the user class from this one package and not the user class from package C, right? What namespaces give us is they give us this container. So here in this case, it's a Laravel example. Illuminate console is the namespace, and then the class is command. So if we want to call this command, we're going to use this namespace. And then when we call our command class, our application knows to only use the one under that namespace. So in this case, we could have 2 command classes. They could be under different namespaces, and we would have a conflict there. It just gives us a lot better encapsulation against all the packages and libraries you might use throughout your app. You can see used. So we're defining the namespace, eliminate console. Our class exists under that. So then when we want to use it later, we can do use eliminate console command. That's going to tell our app for this context that you're in, you're going to use this namespace. We can also call it directly. So if we want to do var command equals new eliminate console command, that would give us just that one. Or if we use to use, we can do var command equals new command because it knows to use that namespace already. All right, statics. I talk about statics because both they're cool and they're kind of misused and overused a lot of times in PHP. Especially when they first came out, everyone was like, oh, we have statics now, let's make everything a static. Who cares about that it's actually a design pattern underneath, it just looks cool, right? So let's talk a little bit about how you should use statics. The idea behind it is you have a method that's kind of a one-time use. You still want to logically group it in this class, but you don't need to retain state. You don't need inheritance. You don't need to track state across your object. It's just a one-time use command. Here we have route get from our early example. This just says, let's take our route class and call the get method. We're not instantiating the object. We're not tracking the state of that object over time. We're just calling that method real quick from that route. That's how you define it, just public static function. You can do private static function, whatever. But the static's the keyword there. Just note this. So like I said, you're not tracking state across your objects. You're not distinguishing your object and tracking your state over time. You do have access to vars of definition and vars of execution. So in this case, you have self, which gives you the var definition, and then you have static, which gives you the var execution. So if you change some things between the time you define it and you execute it, that's how you differentiate on which one you want. Again, you don't have access to this. There are some kind of, I'll say, interesting, kind of hacky ways to mimic state across that with static. Usually we use them as like an accessor or a singleton. So let's say we want to quickly grab this current object in its current state. We can do like a singleton call with a static to do that. Short array syntax. This is really is not a big deal at all, but it looks cool. And you need to know what it is when you see it. Also, you might see an error related to it if you're upgrading your packages or libraries and you're using an older PHP server. So traditionally, we had arrays defined like this. Array equals array, right? Now what we have is we have the square brackets. This is like JavaScript, a lot of other languages define arrays like this. It's called short array syntax. To find a new array, we can just use the square brackets. If you want an empty array, just do square bracket, or you can find a full array like this. So if you see an error thrown, maybe you're on PHP 5.3, only had it, and you're using a library that does use this, you might see an error. That means you need to upgrade your PHP because it doesn't yet support this. But this is introduced in 5.4. All right, the null coalescing operator, this was introduced in PHP 7, which is pretty new. The idea behind it is a lot of times in our apps, I'm sure we all do this plenty, we'll say this value equals, if this is set, it equals this. Otherwise, if it's not set, it's going to equal this default value. So like this here. So val equals, is set get val, we're going to make it get val. Otherwise, it's going to equal this default string. The null coalescing operator just gives us a really quick shorthand to this. You just do double question marks, and it's going to do the is set for you. And if that is set, it's going to pass in that get val. Otherwise, it's going to use your default end. Really nice shorthand. Yeah.
I prefer for this paradigm to just have my own wrapper that essentially does this, but I have the flexibility that to define what invalid means. Because sometimes invalid is 0, sometimes invalid is just empty string, sometimes invalid is null.
Yeah, so this is all going to be an is set. And that's just what people usually use, right? But it is built into the language. So it's going to be more performant than just doing your own wrapping function. But yeah, that's a good point. This is only going to do an is set on this. So is set get. And is set does have a few tricks to it. You want to check that out. Check to see if it's null and if it's empty. All right, traits. Traits are for grouping without strict inheritance. So maybe you want to group certain methods together. Maybe you want to be able to use them further on. Maybe you want to compose an object, but without inheriting throughout. It's a little hard to explain, so I want to show it off here. Here we have the trait, so base user. This base user has a get name method, and we're going to have other types of users. So we have an admin user, we have a publisher user, whatever. They all need this get name method, but for whatever reason, we don't want to inherit the base user. So if something changes with the base user, we don't want to inherit that to our admin user, but we do want all these methods available. So here we have our class admin user. We're going to use base user. What this does is basically like we took this base user's methods and we dropped them into the admin user's object. And so that admin user now has access to all that base user's methods. Here you can see we're doing admin user equals new admin user. And then admin user arrow get name. So that was never defined in our admin user, but because it wasn't a base user, we can access it.
So what's the advantage of that over just extending the class?
So that's kind of it's a bigger discussion. There's composition over inheritance, right? And so depending on the way you want to construct your objects, you might want to inherit throughout your application. You define object A, and then it inherits as it goes. You have your basic structure. But then there's also composition, where you're kind of composing what you want your object to be at the end by pulling in various pieces. There's various reasons for it. There's a lot of debates about it, which is best in which cases. I definitely recommend just Google composition for inheritance or composition versus inheritance, things like that. You can kind of see both methods. And it really just depends on the use case. In some cases, you might be modifying objects pretty often, and you're afraid someone's going to modify that, and you don't want that to happen. You want whatever you define in your definition to be what you get into your objects without inheriting throughout. Kind of vague. I can show you some good examples later if you want to chat more about it. All right, so PDO has been around a while, but it's still not super used, which is kind of sad. A lot of people are still using like the old MySQL functions or the Postgres functions. PDO is a cross database system. These are some of the more popular databases it supports. It supports more than this. But you'll see it has MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, MS SQL. Probably any database you're using, unless it's some really obscure one, supported by PDO. The idea of PDO is it gives you a central way to access all of this. So we need the same API to the PDO system to access any database behind it. So if you write your code in PDO, your users, let's say you write a library, access the database, you write it in PDO, and your users can upload that to Postgres, to MySQL, to whatever they're using. They don't have to port your code. You just write it once and it works as a word. Also has safe binding. So like with the old MySQL extensions, you would have MySQL, and then you have to call MySQL escape, and you have to really make sure MySQL row escape string. You want to make sure you use the right function where to escape and pass that throughout. It also lets you open to structural orders with like SQL injection. So it has safe binding, which is what I'm showing here. We're going to prepare the statement, and then we're going to pass through this ID. See the colon ID. Then we're going to bind that parameter. So we're binding colon ID to the ID variable. And then when we execute that, it's going to throw it in there. So it's just a few things. It's going to escape it properly, but it also retains the structure of your query. So you can't change the structure of that query. You can't just throw in like a colon, Bobby drop tables, right? As an XKCD. All right, so for the tools. For a while now, a lot of other languages, especially web languages like Ruby, Python, they've had all these really cool tools that help you expedite your development, and help you quickly scaffold or quickly start up servers, etc. And PHP was kind of left out. We would start a new project by copying and pasting from an old project instead of Apache from scratch every time, right? Lately, in the past couple of years, PHP's really had this focus on tools. So how do we make the developer's life easier when they're in PHP? So what we have here, we have a built-in web server. This is not going to replace your production server. It's not going to replace your LAMP stack, your Apache, your Nginx. If you're doing local development on your machine, it's really great to get started. I use this a lot when I'm doing like freelance projects, and I'm jumping project to project. When I jump into a project, let's go into the folder, I'll start with the server, and I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about setting up vhost or anything like that. That's what it looks like. So from the command line, you're just going to cd into your folder that you want your root to be. So instead we cd into our project. Then we run php-s, and then whether your domain and then your port. So your localhost 8000. We're going to get some messages. So here you can see I'm in htdocs, my document root. So that's what it's going to point to if I go to localhost 8000 in my browser. Really great for just like quickly booting up a project. You don't have to worry about too many settings, anything like that. Yep.
Yeah, it's single-threaded. I think that's important to point out.
Yeah, it is single-threaded. I mean, this is not going to be something you use for production. It's not going to be anything you use for performance. It's something you use local for testing for development. All right, Composer. Another package manager for PHP. A lot of times people wonder, why do we need another one? We have pair, we have whatever. Why something else? Composer brings quite a few things to the table that we haven't had before. One, it's more up to date. It has a more focus on quality packages. It's also very easy to contribute to. Pair for a long time was really just a real pain with your packages in there, you don't want data, things like that. You also had to compile pair into PHP. So it was a real pain to use in general. And a lot of packages weren't updated. You might find a package that was 10 years old and hasn't been updated in 8 years, right? Now you have Composer, which is fairly up to date, super easy to use. You can install it across your system, or you can install it just in one project, and you can quickly use it. It has settings for you can use a global repository, which packages is the big one right now, just get packages over. Or you can use, say, a company repository, so you can boot up a Composer instance just for your company. You have your own private Composer dependency management. It also uses auto-loading, so as we'll talk about in a little bit, the PSR4. It follows PSR4, so it has auto-loading built in. And really, it's just better than Pair. So if you use Pair now, just try it out. You'll probably fall in love. The way you define your management here, you're going to have a composer.json file for your project. You're going to define packages you want to pull in and the versions. You can have different prod and dev versions if you like. You can say version greater than X. You can say version has to be X. There's various ways you can define this to make sure you get a version you need. Also, when you pull down this version, it's going to make a log file. So that's one great thing here. When we pull this down, let's pull it down, and we update and install it, right? We're going to get a log file that says, these are the exact versions I have. You commit that log file to your repo, and then all the other devs that come behind you on production servers, whatever, however you structure it, it'll use that log file to put on those exact versions. So you're not going to be surprised that you go to production and then you got a different version of something something's broken. Or developer A and developer B have different versions on their machines and they're getting different interactions, different APIs, or something breaks. You can ensure that you're all using the same program. This is what it looks like. So here we're going to do new services Twilio. Because it's using auto-loading, it's going to know where to pull that class from, what file to go require, where to find that, and then all you have to do is say, this Twilio, it's going to automatically pull all that in, it's going to auto-load it into your application. Then you just use it. So here we have client account messages, send message. Unit testing. So a few tools for unit testing in PHP. PHP unit, we have probably some more well-known. Selenium's pretty well-known. It's not just for PHP, but you do use it across a lot of PHP projects. There's a lot of options out there now. It's really great that unit testing has really had a resurgence in the PHP community. For a while, we were known as just kind of gunslingers. People who do PHP just kind of throw something together on the weekend, and it's horrible, and real programmers use Ruby, or real programmers use C, or whatever. But there's been a real resurgence in quality for PHP. PHP is a first-class language. We can write quality applications in PHP, and we can test those applications to make sure they work properly. This is what a PHP unit test looks like. This is just a very basic test. So in this case, we're going to instantiate the API auth class, and we're going to assert that we can verify. Whatever that means. It probably means that we can verify our certs or our API key or whatever that will be, right? What to note here is that we're extending PHP unit framework test class, and then we're asserting true on this. So this gets us access to PHP unit, and then we're asserting true. So I'm just going to say did verify return true. Then we can run this from our command line. So your application will have a ton of these, right? You're going to test everything throughout your app. You're going to unit test everything you use. Run PHP unit test. And it's going to go through, it's going to run all your tests for you. It's going to run your test suite against your application and then tell you what you have. So in this case, we have one test, one assertion, and we're okay. You can have a failure here, and then it would show you what test failed. This is great because you can test on all your sensitive parts of your application, and it'll tell you, let's say you refactor something, you run your test, and then it fails. It tells you what to go look for. So you go look at your test and see, oh, how's this using that? Oh, we broke that. Let's go fix it. Instead of waiting on a user to go click through your app and find an error, or maybe not find an error, and then something goes wrong in production, Here, you can yourself assert that your application is working the way you expect. Write these tests now, and then 2 years from now, when you don't even remember what it does, the test will still make sure that it works properly. All right, let's jump to standards. I've never given this talk before, so hopefully we don't go too long or short. Looks like we're about on time, so we'll see. All right, PHP Fig. It is the framework interop group. They are a group of, well, originally it was a group of frameworks. It was like 4 or 5 frameworks. Their contributors got together and they said, hey, we're doing the same thing a lot. We're all doing our own auto loading. We're all doing our own coding styles, things like that. How about we standardize? That way people can easily jump between our projects. That way we all don't have to write the same code over and over. We can share some code between ourselves. The project grew, so now it's a ton of member projects. Frameworks, CRMs, etc. Some just packages. They all get together and it's a consortium, so they're voting on these PSRs, which are recommendations. Some of them follow. There's some rules, I think, on how many they have to follow. They don't all follow all the PSRs. But based on the voting and what their projects decide, they're mostly following these PSRs. So you have these group of projects that all use the same standards throughout. It makes it great for us because if we want to write a library, say for RML, if we write it according to these standards, it will also work instantly. And so we can share our code between them. It's also a lot easier to jump between projects. Some of the more notable member projects, there are a ton. Symphony, Laravel, Drupal, they're all member projects. So you know that it's been vetted pretty well throughout the community. PSRs stand for PHP Standards Recommendation. So the PHP Fig is the group, and then what they're putting together are the PSRs. So those are the standards that they're recommending to the community. So the main ones right now are auto-loading, interfaces, and style guides. PSR 4 is the current auto-loading standard. This superseded PSR 0, which you might have heard about a few years ago. Composer is the big one there, right? They're now on PSR 4, so you know it's vetted. PSR 1 is the basic coding standards. Most people don't have a problem with PSR 1. I believe all member projects and most member projects do follow PSR 1. It's just really basic things. PSR 2 is a little more differentiating. It's a lot more community. Then we have some newer ones. So the HTTP message interface is a standard way for projects to interact with HTTP requests and responses. We have the caching interface. It's a standard way for projects to use caching. And then we have the logger interface again, standard way to log across projects. The great thing here, really, is that as you switch projects, say your company has 4 projects that you use 4 different frameworks over time. You have a library of code you've written for this. Now you can use it across different projects. You don't have to rewrite your code every time you do something new. Auto-loading, like I said, replaces PSR 0 and is used by Composer. It looks like this, as we saw earlier. So we're just going to say, client equal new services Twilio, because we're auto-loading and knows where to find that. The way it does that is there's a certain standard to the way you structure your directories and the way you name your namespaces, so that it can easily tell how to navigate the directories to find the file based on your namespace and your class name. PSR 1 is basic coding styles. It covers camel casing, not for everything, but for most things you're going to use, like your variables or camel case. How you should open and close your PHP tags, your namespacing, which again is based on PSR 4. How you should name your classes, and then you should use UTF-8. This one, again, is pretty standard across most projects. PSR 2 is where things get a little hairy. The main one people have problems here is that it forces a 4-space indentation. And tabs versus spaces is a pretty big fight between developers because we all want something we love. I really used to be a tabs guy. I love tabs. I think it makes more sense, and I think spaces are stupid. But I use spaces now because it's generally accepted across projects. And there's no reason just to be different because you prefer it. When you're going to be working in projects with other developers, you really should try to adhere to what they're using. The reason for a coding style is so that everyone can get along easier and easier time. Your own personal style is not as good as what's great for the larger community. Also covers a lot of like where should you put your braces, should you go on this line, the next line, how many new lines should you have after your class name, should goals be uppercase or lowercase, things like that. It gets a lot more detailed and opinionated. Most projects have moved to this now. So if you're using Symfony or Laravel, you're probably used to seeing this kind of style already. HTTP message interface, standard devices, requests and responses. So most frameworks just kind of using whatever, they were coding their own. HTTP is a big deal to code against. A lot of people ended up using Symfony's core classes because they have pretty good ones in place. But now we have the standardized interface for it. So like Symfony and Godzilla are all moving into this now. So it'll be standardized across projects. I'm not going to go through the rest because you get the idea at this point, all right? If you're interested, I definitely recommend you check out PHP Thick. Great standards. Again, it's a community-ran group. So this isn't PHP saying you have to do things this way. It's a group of PHP users, projects saying, hey, we all agree that we should do things this way, and we recommend the community does it too. It's not anything from Zen from PHP forcing you to do anything a certain way. All right, so one of the best things about PHP, in my opinion, I've been through quite a few developer communities, quite a few languages at this point. The best thing about PHP is the community. Every conference you go to, every place where you ask a question, you're usually invited, you're welcomed. People are glad to answer the question. People are glad to meet you at the conferences. There's not this elitist thing. A lot of languages, a lot of communities get this real elitist thing. We're better than you. We know this, you don't. It's real aggressive, so you have a question, you might get shut down. It's not a welcoming community. PHP really thrives with the community. We're a group of people that all just happen to use the same tool set, but we're all humans, and we're all going to make something good by the end of the day, right? So great places to interact with the PHP community. I don't know your situation. I work from home. I work from home for like 4 years now, for the most part. It can be very isolating. You don't get the coworkers. You don't get people that are also in tech like you. For a while, I've been in a small town in Alabama. I knew 0 people that could barely even use a computer, right? So I really got the community interaction, the feel of having friends and having a tribe of my own via the internet, via these PHP communities, via conferences. So it's something very near and dear to my heart because it was something that I really needed. We need that. We need the fellowship, the coworkers, things like that, the colleagues. When we're a person bigger, you don't want to just sit off on your own forever. Twitter, I recommend checking out the PHPC user on Twitter. This is just an aggregate of the PHP community. They just retweet a lot of things that they find interesting. You can find other people who follow from that. Cal Edmunds is a very active community member of PHP, and he has a list of PHP people. So I definitely recommend checking that out. It's just a list of people on Twitter that you probably want to follow that are active in PHP. And then if you have a favorite framework or project, there's nothing wrong with getting involved in a frameworks community. A lot of people kind of shy away from that because they feel like, oh, we shouldn't get so tied into a certain framework, which is true. I'm very big on being framework agnostic and being open and willing to move projects and frameworks, and not being a war about it, PHP dev, right? But if there's a framework you enjoy and you're using a lot, there's nothing wrong with getting involved in the community there, meeting the people. You all have something in common that's kind of niche, even no matter how big the framework is. Using that framework makes it a niche for you. And you can really get to know and have that community aspect and that feel of friends there. And you all might move on to something else eventually. That's not a big deal. But the relationships you'll make there will last forever. I've had so many relationships in Coding Matter back in the day that are still some of my best friends. And I haven't personally used Coding Matter in probably 6 months, right? Mailing list. So the mailing list, if you're into that sort of thing, is php.net/mailing list. It just gets you on a rotating list, and you get, I think you have a few options. You can get like once a day or once a week, if I remember right. I think it's just a while. Some people really like mailing list. You can keep track of your email, what's going on. You can ask questions. You can interact with people on there. IRC, really recommend you check out IRC if you haven't yet. It's real time. It's a chat. It's like Slack or IM or anything you're used to like that. It's older protocol, but it's a lot of great people on there. It's been kind of the mainstay of the PHP community for years. Check out pound PHP on Freenode or pound PHPC. So pound PHP is a great place to go through the questions. We talk about something technical, maybe bounce some ideas on people. If there's something you can't figure out, you need some help walking through it. PHPC is just about the community. It's not about asking questions. It's not about the code. It's about, hey, we all do PHP. Let's just chat. Let's hang out. It's kind of like the water cooler of the PHP community. It's open to anyone to check out, to join, to participate in. Just jump in and start talking. So blogs you want to check out: Planet PHP and PHP Architect. Planet PHP is just an aggregator of other PHP blogs. So if you're trying to find out who you want to follow, what you want to read, you want to get involved, check out Planet PHP, see who they're aggregating, start reading those blogs, and then you can expand from there. It's a good starting point. Then PHP Architect, they do a magazine, they do conferences, and they do blog posts specifically about PHP. And it's a great focus source of just information. Also, Sandy is here, I believe. No, Sandy's not here. There's someone from PHP Architect here, so you see him around in an orange shirt, definitely say hey. Eli, yeah, it's Eli. It's a podcast. Voices of the Elephant by Cal Edmunds. Usually he does it at conferences, but he just kind of does it randomly too. He'll grab somebody from PHP doing something cool, and they'll just chat about what they're doing, what they've been up to. It's a great way to learn about what's going on. PHP Roundtable by Sammy Kay. Usually they get a bunch of PHP developers together, either in person at a conference or remotely via video chat. And really they just kind of chat for a while. It's really a good time. It's one of my favorite podcasts because a bunch of people without even like a super strict topic, just kind of hanging out. You feel like you're a part of the conversation even though you're not. And the PHP Town Hall, this is a plug for me. This is the podcast I do with Phil. Usually we just get on, us two, and then one or two guests. We chat about a certain topic. It's also very loose. Usually by the end of the conversation, we forgot what the topic was. We also tend to have a few drinks, so if you're offended by that, it might not be a podcast for you. Local user groups. So I know you had some great user groups here. There's a meeting tonight with your local user group. If you've never been to one, definitely check it out. So what a user group is, it's like a mini conference. It's people from the area, your local developers, get together, usually every month, maybe a couple times a month. And most PHP user groups are 20 to 50 people, so it's a smaller venue, and you can really make connections. You can meet people in your local community that you could meet with more often. It's not just a once-a-year conference. If you're not from here, if you travel here, definitely check it out. Usually Meetup has all the user groups on there. Check what, usually close to the biggest city will have one. If there's not one, maybe start one. Maybe just sign up for a Meetup page, throw some info, say, hey, I'm a developer and I want to meet other local developers. It doesn't have to be anything super formal. Really, it's just a couple of developers hanging out. Because again, it gets you out of that shell, it gets you into your bigger community, so you're not isolated and alone. Yeah. If you have any questions about starting one, I'm starting a couple, feel free to ask. Again, it's just like doing a dinner date. It's not a big deal. You're meeting with a couple of developers. A lot of times you'll chat about what's new. As it gets bigger, you'll do full-on presentations. It's a really good time. I can't recommend the local user group enough. The conferences. So one big thing about a conference is that you don't want to just do sessions. Sessions are great and you learn a lot, but if you don't at least have one or two slots, usually I'd say at least one slot a day for a conference where you're just hanging out, you're just in the hallway, you're just chatting with people, you're networking, you're meeting new people. That's one of the most valuable things about a conference to me, because you meet people that you're going to know forever, you chat about things that you wouldn't hear about. A lot of conference talks are pretty direct. It's just, how do you do this thing, or what's this kind of beginner? A lot of it's beginner based, right? When you're chatting with someone, you need to hear like, what are they working on? They could be working on something crazy that would be a horrible conference talk, but it's super interesting. You learn a lot from that. Then also you get the personal aspect. You get to meet someone, get to know them. You can carry on a relationship later. Dinner, definitely try to get out, go to dinner with people. Most people are hanging out in the lobby after their conference, trying to plan dinner. Speakers usually always go out when everyone's invited, everyone wants to go. At least for the speakers are all from out of town, they don't know where to go. So meeting locals that want to hang out, they love that. drinks. Most conferences have happy hours, so people at least go out to bars later. Even if you don't drink, it's a great time to really socialize. People lighten up. It's not under it's not under the conference. It's just a bunch of people hanging out. Usually, well into midnight most nights at the conference, people are hanging out somewhere, either at the hotel, a lot of times the hotel lobby, or just the closest bar to the hotel, or the closest restaurant. Things like that. Really, when you go to a conference, try not to just focus on the knowledge and the learning, but on meeting people and the relationships you can build for later. A lot of the jobs have gotten over time. People I met at a conference years ago, and the relationship built over time. All right, finally, some resources for you to check out. PHP.net, this has been updated a ton over the years. So anything you need to know about the PHP API, any questions you have on how to use a method or a class or whatever, you can usually find on here. It's very easy, very well organized. Check out some modern frameworks. Even if you don't want to use the framework, check out how they do things. See what's new. A lot of times a framework will try something new, it'll be something you've never seen before. You can also check out how they structured, how they accomplish certain tasks. Different frameworks accomplish things very differently. You can learn a lot of great patterns that you can use later when you're developing something for yourself, just from reading their code. These are people that put a ton of effort and energy in writing good code. It's definitely something to learn.
Question.
Yeah.
Which framework of those on the list do you find the most performant?
That is very subjective. So performance in general is probably going to be Silex just because it's super micro, but that depends on what you're doing. If you want straight performance, probably like Falcon because it's written in C.
Which one?
Falcon is written in C, so it's probably going to be the most performant PHP framework in general.
Okay.
All right, PHP the Right Way is a book and a website. So phptherightway.com, it's a free resource. And the PHP the Right Way book is, I think it's a couple bucks. All the proceeds are donated to the EFF. People have contributed over time. The best way to do things with PHP is opinionated, but it's a great resource. So if you need to do X in PHP, you don't know how to, or maybe you haven't done this in a few years, and you assume better ways have been suggested, better ways are popular in the community. Go check here. It's a great resource. It might not be exactly the way you want to do it, but it'll give you some great ideas on how people are usually handling the situation in the community, whether it's caching or logging or authentication, password hashing, whatever. Any kind of problem you have, and you want to do the best accepted way to do it right now, you check it out. And then plug for my book. I would really appreciate if you check it out. It's buildsecurephpapps.com. The coupon code is SKIPHP. That you get $10 off, so it'll be $14.99. And that's it. You can catch me at Edmunds on Twitter if you want to chat anymore. Edmunds.com. And I would really appreciate it if you rate and talk and joined in. Again, this is the first time I'm giving the talk, so feedback would be great, both positive and negative. Let me know what you enjoyed, what you didn't, and that'll help me structure the talk for later so that I can make this talk as good as it can be. And now, for any questions?
You go back to that last slide.
Yeah.
I like the grind. Yeah, that
All right, anyone have any questions? Cool. All right, I will be around if you have any. I'll be hanging out either here or probably in the hall for the next 30 minutes or so. Feel free to walk up, we can chat just about what you're working on or anything you want to chat more about what I showed you. Thank you all for coming.